I steered the small inflatable boat toward the shore. As I looked back at the horizon, I admired the beautiful pink, purple, and orange colors of the sunset. The white sand and black rocks contrasted on Makalavan Beach. There was no one on the beach, and I was glad for that. I wasn't expecting anyone after all. It was Thursday. That only made my mission easier. As the sun set, darkness would cover my landing, and there would be nothing to worry about. I have bittersweet memories of this beautiful beach. Like a sunrise, tomorrow my life will begin anew, and I regret nothing. Many months before, we could be in one of those HGTV reality shows where a couple decides to move to a tropical region and goes through the process of evaluating several places to live. At the end of the show, they have a fruity drink with the real estate agent, celebrating the purchase of their new home. In our case, we were running not from the snows of the Midwest, but from 9 months of gray skies of the Pacific Northwest. Hillary and I met in Seattle and have been married for 6 years. We were vacationing in Hawaii and decided the Kona area of the Big Island was the right place for us to move. Seattle's gray skies were an important, but not the only reason for the move. We were choosing between a house and a condo, and both options had pros and cons. In the end, we settled on a condominium. The lack of maintenance and the ability to make friends faster were the main reasons we chose the condo. Ali Drive is an oceanfront road that runs south from downtown Kona toward Keauhou Bay. It is lined with homes and condos, and every morning runners, walkers, and bicyclists go up and down it, getting their daily dose of exercise. The condo we stayed at, the Kona Palms, was about a mile south of town and was one of the larger complexes. It had a nice large pool with a hot tub. There was a covered outdoor seating area with a BBQ and a very nice workout area with machines and free weights in an air-conditioned room in front of the pool. Our unit 508 was in the front building overlooking the ocean. It also had 3 bedrooms, a beautiful master bedroom overlooking the ocean, a decent-sized guest room, and a small bedroom in the back overlooking the pool. This would be my office. The realtor said that 3-bedroom condos with an ocean view are rare, and we should count on it. She may have exaggerated the need for urgency, but we offered full price and got it. "Oh, Brian, I'm so excited!" Hillary purred as we closed the condo purchase. "I feel like our life is going to turn into a permanent vacation. Brian, I love you." "This was the right move for us," she exclaimed. "I'm glad you like it, and I do too. But as for a permanent vacation, I have a more than full-time job, and yes, you have a tight schedule. We still have to maintain this new lifestyle," I said. "I know," Hillary said, "but let me just think about a vacation for now." I smiled at her and gave her a hug. This really was my dream, and I was glad that Hillary was happy here too. We were actually in pretty good shape. The house I sold in Kirkland allowed us to easily pay the rent and monthly installments. After the purchase, we had a good amount of capital left, and there was also my secret account, which Hillary didn't know about at the time. Hillary is an emergency nurse, and because of her experience, she easily found a job at Kona County Hospital. She negotiated a shift schedule of 3 10-hour day shifts. I am a commodities broker. I can live anywhere. I worked in an office in downtown Seattle for the first 10 years. The knowledge I learned from the veterans in that office allows me to work remotely now. By the time we got the keys and moved in, we had been on the Big Island for about 8 weeks. We were adjusting to the new way of life. I had to keep an eye on the markets and socialize with people on the mainland. I was usually up at 4 a.m. and working in my office by 5. Hillary worked Monday through Wednesday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Thursday she relaxed and recovered, and by Friday she went into vacation mode. I knew her job was challenging and stressful. When I could, I would leave early on Thursdays and Fridays, and we would start our weekends. We moved in on Wednesday and in the process met a few new neighbors. Everyone seemed friendly and the people were diverse. Older, younger, singles, couples, and different ethnicities. We learned that the condo was hosting a Pauhana night this Friday. Everyone would gather in the pool area around 6 p.m. There was food, sometimes music, and everything was optional. Apparently it happened a couple times a month and there were different events or themes. Everything was planned through the general manager of the condominium. We entered the restaurant around 6:30 with a chilled bottle of white wine and a 6-pack of beer in an ice chest. We found a free table and were seated. We met a lot of people and everyone seemed nice, with varying levels of friendliness. There were definitely some heroes of their own. One of the first people we met were Clarence and Lynn. They are a gay couple who moved from San Francisco. They live at the Palms full-time. Clarence is a large, older black man who taught economics at UC Berkeley. Lynn was a stockbroker who retired in his early 50s. I got the impression that money was not a problem for them. Then we met Bob and Ramona Platt. The Platts were in their 50s, originally from Texas, and had lived here for a short time. Bob was a builder who made his money developing land in and around Houston. Both were a little heavy-set, dressed in brightly colored flowered shirts, good-natured and seemed to like whiskey. I like everything about Hawaii, but I can't stand flowery shirts. Another interesting couple was Banks Redmond and Chloe Davenport. They're married. We learned that Chloe works as a vice president at a large bank in Southern California, and Banks is a psychologist by training, but also considers himself a real estate developer investor. Chloe seems to be shuttling back and forth between Hawaii and Los Angeles. Banks said that for now he's working at the Palms full-time. I have a project I'm working on locally, actually on the high-low side. We can drive down there sometime and take a look at it if you'd like, explained Banks. Banks looked about 5 or 6 years older than me. He was in his late 30s or maybe 40s. Chloe looked a little older. She was a slim and attractive woman with a serious expression on her face. Blonde with fair skin. She looked rich, which, as we later found out, she was. Banks was swarthy, probably of Mediterranean descent. He was a few inches taller than me, about 6 feet 2 inches, very tanned and in good shape. He had a scruffy look, but so far he was a nice guy. I met many other people at Pauhana, but I had a long conversation with Banks. He told me that he counseled people informally. He called himself a relationship specialist, whatever that meant. He was interesting and had some charisma. He asked about my business and how we had chosen Kona as a place to live. While we were talking, I realized that Hillary hadn't been at our table in a while and casually glanced over to see where she was. She was talking to a young, skinny surfer with a deep tan and curly blonde hair. He looked to be in his early 20s. They were laughing and standing pretty close. Banks noticed me watching them. That's Corey White, he told me. He's a resident Palms woman hunter, Banks explained. What? Said I. Yeah, a young, good-looking guy like that pounces on female tourists and has a lot of fun, continued Banks. I get up to go intercede. I did a calming exercise, deep inhale, deep exhale, deep inhale, deep exhale. I looked back at Banks, and he had this look on his face like he was mentally analyzing the situation. Hi, Hill, I announced, wrapping my arms around her waist and kissing her cheek. Oh, Brian, I think I surprised her, and it took her a moment to calm down. This is Corey. He's a marine biologist. He's been telling me about what lives in the ocean. Brian Rivers, I said, extending my hand. Nice to meet you, Corey replied. He grabbed my hand, and I squeezed it even tighter. His expression changed from friendly to, what the hell are you doing? Deep breaths, deep breaths. Hillary went on and on about what an interesting man he was, and how he had suggested that we ride on his boat to see the dolphins and sharks and so on. I just stood there with a silly smile on my face and nodded. See ya, I said, and directed Hillary back to our table. When I looked back, White gave me a perplexed look. We returned to our table, and Hillary started talking to Chloe and Ramona. I just watched the events unfold. My attention never wavered from White. Don't worry, he never preys on married people, I heard a deep ringing baritone. It was Clarence. Excuse me? I asked. I saw you watching young Mr. White, said Clarence. A pleasant man, and it's not bad to watch him either. But I wouldn't worry about him and married women. I'm not worried about any of that, I stammered. I was a little embarrassed that Clarence had noticed my jealousy. Same thing, my boy, rest assured. Corey is a young, red-blooded heterosexual, but he has his own set of rules. Married women are definitely off limits to him. He and I have had many ethical discussions. Thank you for the information, but I assure you it doesn't bother me, I replied. Good, all good relationships are built on trust, Mr. Rivers, stated Clarence and departed, giving me a friendly pat on the shoulder. Sitting at the table, I thought about Clarence's words. It was almost exactly a year ago. We were invited to a party by one of Hillary's co-workers when we lived in Kirkland, just outside of Seattle. These parties can be fun, but sometimes they boil down to hospital gossip and complaining about work, which can get boring for an outsider like me. Hillary was excited and looked great. She is about 30 years old, 3 years younger than me. She has thick, dark blonde shoulder-length hair. She has a sloping body. I think it was her open smile and beautiful eyes that initially caught my attention. Truth be told, when I first saw her, I was only interested in getting her into my bed, but then I got to know her better. That story could wait. But it can't be helped, she really does give off a sexual energy. I'm used to her attracting male and sometimes female attention. I'm just trying to stay calm. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Anyway, we get to a party at the home of one of her friends and Carly's co-workers. It's the usual crowd. I know about a third of the group by name, and another third I've seen at some similar events before. When we walked in, I saw an old high school soccer teammate, John Washington. He is hard to miss. John is huge and seems to have gotten even bigger since high school. We played soccer together at Met-Tahoma High School. I was a running back and John played on the offensive line. We weren't friends in high school, but we were friends. I was glad to see him. We ended up having a beer, talking and working things out. It turned out that his wife, Mandy, works as a midwife at Overlake Hospital, the same hospital where Hillary works. John and I and a few other people sat in one corner talking about sports, women, and the usual topics. About an hour and a half into the party, the energy changes a bit. A couple of guys from the group I was with look toward the door, and the conversation seemed to stop for a minute, and then there are loud cheers about something. I looked around, and then a tall, dark-haired guy walked into the party. I'm straight, of course, but I have to admit that the guy was good-looking. As I watch him walk in, I look across the room at Hillary. She looks at the guy, and then I see Carly and another friend looking at Hillary. Carly whispers something, and then they all giggle. What was that? My antenna is up, but I'm acting calm. A few of the guys I'm chatting with start talking about him, and I find out his name is Greg Gorchich. Turns out he's been working in Boston for the last 4 or 5 years, and now he's back in Seattle. He's some kind of cool doctor. I look over and see Hillary hugging him tightly. When she starts to look in my direction, I am once again involved in the discussion my group has been having. I want to keep secretly watching to see what happens. I admit I can get jealous, but I try to apply my calming techniques to stay calm. Throughout the evening, Dr. Gorchich and Hillary do not take a step away from each other. At one point, I notice that they have separated themselves from the others and are seated in a quiet corner. Now I can remain calm, but at this point I apologize and walk over to them. Putting my arm around Hillary's shoulders, I look up at him and introduce myself. Brian Rivers, I say and shake Gorsuch's hand. Greg Gorchich, he replies with a charismatic smile. Greg, this is my husband Brian, Hillary says. You're married, he says with a slightly shocked expression on his face. Hillary doesn't usually wear a wedding ring because of her job in the emergency room. Yes, didn't I mention that? Hillary hissed. She looks alternately at me and Gorchich. Gorsuch quickly picks up on it and says, Oh, maybe it is. Anyway, Brian, you have a beautiful bride. Congratulations to you both. Now I don't want to take up anyone's time. There are others I need to meet, says Gorsuch. With a quick kiss on Hillary's cheek and a squeeze on my shoulder, he withdrew. An awkward silence hung between me and Hill. So you know this guy? I asked Hillary. She looked at me with a certain tinge of guilt on her face. Yes. He worked at Swedish when I was there before we were married. And? I asked. He was part of a young group that sometimes hung out together. She said this with some awkwardness in her voice. Well, you definitely spent a lot of time with him tonight. Did you go out with him? I asked. No, not really. We were just friends. Now let's just forget about it, she said. I know I don't have it all figured out, but I'm jealous, I admit it. But sometimes she gives me reason to be jealous. She's never done anything, but she's flirty. And I know she had a bit of a wild past. I didn't know all the stories, but I'd heard some things. About 3 weeks after the party, I got a call out of the blue from my old high school buddy, John Washington. John's office is not far from mine in downtown Seattle, and he asked me to meet him for a beer at one of the downtown bars after work. Sure, John, my pleasure. I say that's a little weird. I like John, but we've never really been close friends. When I ask him what's up, he just says we'll talk tonight. I met John at Pinecone, an upscale bar near Pioneer Square. We ordered beers and I asked what was up. Brian, it's none of my business, but you're my friend, and I have a duty to let you know what's going on, he said. Shall we continue? I was confused. What's going on? I was starting to get turned on. Calm down and let me explain, replied John. Deep breath, deep breath. Mandy works with your wife at Overlake. Remember that guy all the girls were looking at Carly's party a few weeks ago? He asked. Who? I asked, but I thought I already knew. You know, mister. Soap opera GQ, who is fashionably late, he explained. Yeah, I know who you mean, Greg. What about him? I didn't like where this was going. I was starting to get angry and John could sense it. Calm down, Brian. Let me get to the point, John calmly continued. Mandy said this guy is in Overlake now. Apparently your wife has had lunch with him a few times, just the two of them. Mandy says they always sit alone in the cafeteria, away from everyone else. So far so good, not too bad. And she says they look too cozy and this guy has a reputation. What's the reputation? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. I know his type. And tall, handsome ladies of the male type usually get any woman they want. Mandy also said she heard like they had some sort of relationship back in the day. What kind of relationship? I asked. Mandy didn't know, that's all she heard, said John. Hillary and I were talking about old boyfriends and my old girlfriends, but I had never heard of Dr. Greg until that party. He's a player, John said. Mandy stays away from him. Did something happen to Hillary that she saw? I asked John. Mandy didn't think so, but on Thursday this week a group of them are going to go after work. Your wife tried to get Mandy to come, but she refused. And when Mandy tried to say something to your wife about Mr. Wimpy Hound, your wife just laughed and said he was harmless. Look, you're my friend and teammate, and I'm only relaying what Mandy told me. But if it were me, I'd definitely make sure all this cozy business stopped, exclaimed John. Exclaimed. He had a drink and I told him the beer was on me and that I was going to sit for a few minutes. We said goodbye and he wished me luck. My initial reaction was to go home and crash with her. But say what? That I'd heard she'd had lunch with an old friend a few times. She would accuse me of jealousy and immaturity. Plan B was to see what would happen Thursday night. For a couple days, I was to keep a low profile and pretend nothing happened. On Wednesday after work, she told me about the meeting on Thursday. According to Hillary, a group of nurses were going out for drinks and possibly a bite to eat. She said I would be dining alone that night. I had a plan. I purposely didn't ask where they were going. Interestingly, she didn't offer that information either. Later that night, I texted John and asked him to ask Mandy to find out where the party would be held after work, and that Mandy not inform Hillary of my request. He hummed approvingly and said he would text me the location tomorrow. Just after noon, I received a text from John. Belinda is at Bellevue at 6 p.m. Thank you, I sent back. During the day on Thursday, I had no calls or texts from Hill. After work, I went to my gym and worked out. I left the gym around 7 o'clock and got to Belinda's at 7:30. I ordered takeout. Their food is actually pretty good. The place looked busy and I saw Hillary's car in the parking lot. I walked in and told the waitress that I had an order. I was told to pay at the bar and that everything was almost ready. I noticed a group of them at a large table at the bar. As I slowly approached, I saw several nurses I recognized, and in one corner sat Hillary and Dr. Greg. I couldn't tell if he was hugging her or just laying on the back of her chair. Either way, he was trying to occupy his territory. They seemed to be having a private conversation, away from the rest of the group. I walked over and feigned surprise. Hillary, I exclaimed, and our eyes met. Brian, she almost shouted, what are you doing here? Several things were happening at this point. She pulled away from the doctor with a guilty look. He was furious that I had interrupted him, and then quickly put on a friendly and innocent look. He held out his hand for a handshake, but I ignored him. A few of the other nurses giggled at the situation. Just want to have dinner, I said. Have a good time. At this point, I grabbed my food and left. As I drove away, I saw that the door of the restaurant was open. Hillary saw me drive away. By the time I got home, I was pretty hungry. While I ate, I turned on SportsCenter and had a beer. I wondered how long it would take Hillary to get home. If everything was innocent, she would continue her evening and get home closer to evening. If, on the other hand, she felt guilty, she would get home fairly quickly. My wait wasn't long. She came in as if nothing had happened, but she kept her eyes on me to gauge my mood. Gosh, you surprised me at Belinda's, she said. Why didn't you stay and visit me? She added. You looked like you were having a good time and I didn't want to disturb you, I said with sarcastic innocence. Well, you could at least say hello to the others, she said. Ha, the others, I said. I only noticed your long-lost doctor friend, I replied. I think by this point she knew I was a little angry, but was going to try to make it my problem. Here we go, there's that jealousy thing again. Greg is a friend of mine that I haven't seen in a while, and he and I were just hanging out. Why do you always think every guy is trying to get in my pants? Other than at a party, I haven't seen him in years, and we were good friends when we were all at Swedish Hospital. Oh, I see, I say. Other than at the party, you didn't get a chance to socialize with him at work, and that's what you did tonight? I ask. Exactly, she says. So there's no chance of catching up at the hospital? Repeated I. Brian, no. I'm busy at work, she states firmly, her voice getting a little louder. Okay, that means no eating together. Not just the two of you in the corner of the cafeteria a few times in the last 3 weeks. So, just so I understand definitively, you haven't spent any one-on-one time with the guy they call a wimp? I ask with feigned innocence. Well, maybe, she says meekly. Forget it, Hillary, you lied to me. You know it, and I know it. I tell her quietly but firmly. What do you have to say for yourself? I ask. She turns away, and that's when the tears start. She knows this is my weakness, and I feel like she wants me to hug her and tell her everything will be okay. Absolutely not. Like I said, Hillary is kind of a coquette, but at least to my knowledge, she has never lied to me. This caused a crack to form in my trust in her. When I ask her to explain again, she runs upstairs crying. I realize again that she wants me to come and comfort her, but it doesn't happen. When I go upstairs, I see that she is in the guest bedroom. With my job, I'm up and out of the house early, long before she gets up. At work, I get distracted, but I decide something in my life. With or without Hillary, I will leave the dreary weather of Washington State and move to Hawaii. Several people from my office have moved and are working remotely. One of my good buddies, Randy, who started working around the same time I did, lives in North Idaho and he loves it. He asks me all the time why I still go to the office. Why don't I live where I want to live since there are no advantages to having an office in Seattle? I have always loved beaches, and Hawaii is my favorite island. The weather, the ocean, the beaches, the people. We vacation there every year, and I decided the Kona area was my favorite. Although Hillary liked Hawaii too, she wasn't willing to move. That was the cause for concern. After lunch, I researched real estate in the Kona area. I usually get home before Hillary, but when I got home Friday night, she was already there. This is going to be interesting, I thought. Hey, honey, she called out to me as I walked in. I've got salmon on the barbecue. You want a beer? I walked into the kitchen and she was acting like Thursday never happened. I took the beer from her, but I didn't kiss her. I took the day off. The house needed to be cleaned and I wanted to have dinner at home tonight. Sound good? She asked. I sat and looked at her. What? She asked. I'm still waiting for an explanation after you lied to me yesterday, I stated. Oh, Brian, I wasn't lying. I was just confused. I knew you were mad and I didn't want to upset you more. She tried to brush it off. Now, what do you want? Teriyaki sauce or dry rub for the salmon? She asked. I don't care about the damn salmon. I want to know why you lied to me, I said. I rarely use profanity, so she knew I was furious. What's the big deal? She objected. Greg was at the restaurant and we were talking. I'm allowed to have friends or you're too insecure for that. She went on the offensive. I was getting really angry. My therapist was whispering in my ear. In my mind, deep breaths. Deep breaths. Here are the facts. You spent over an hour with this guy at Carly's one-on-one party, and he didn't know we were married. The subject was never brought up during the entire conversation. Fact 2. You regularly have lunch with him, just the two of you in the cafeteria, and it causes gossip in the workplace. Fact 3. You socialize with him at Belinda's separately from the rest of the group. And finally, fact 4. You lied to me about seeing him, just catching up. By my calculations, you had at least 6 hours to meet with him one-on-one, so what's the big deal? She just sat there looking down. Mentally, I prepared myself for the possibility that my marriage might end and began to think about a fresh start in Hawaii. I truly loved Hillary and loved everything we did together. But I didn't tolerate the lies. I knew I was jealous, and if I didn't get the truth out of her, it would be over. She continued to remain silent. And finally, I'm sorry, I've been unfair to you, but can I explain? She said. I sat and waited. As you know, my father left when I was 10 years old. I've always needed a man's approval. I know you know that. In high school, I always picked the bad boy jocks. I had a certain reputation. When I graduated from nursing school, all those bad boy jock types were transplanted by doctors. Confident alpha males turned me on back then, I'll admit it. I knew some of it, but not all of it. When I got a job at Swedish Hospital after nursing school, there were a lot of young people there, and we formed a kind of clique. Carly and some of the doctors were in it, including Greg. I dated a few, but nothing lasted. It seemed like all they wanted was sex. I didn't know if I wanted to hear so many details. All the women were attracted to Greg, and he was a bit of a player. I guess I was in love with him too. I started dating one of his friends, Nick Gardner, a radiologist. I soon realized it wasn't serious, but we continued dating for a few more months. I also learned that Nick and Greg were roommates and good friends. One night we were at a party, Nick and I, and Greg was there too. I wasn't sure whose house it was. There was a lot of drinking, and apparently Nick talked me into going to one of the bedrooms upstairs. I had a few drinks too. It's definitely TMI, but I had to hear how it all turned out. We were doing it in someone's room, and after we were just laying there, Greg came into the room. He said it was by mistake. He must have had a lot to drink too. He sat down on the bed and started talking to us. Nick said he had to go to the bathroom and would be right back. I expected Greg to leave, but he didn't. Well, I kind of fell in love with him and he started proposing. Stop! I yell. Are you telling me you had fun with him too? I ask. For a full minute, she doesn't say a word. Finally, sort of. At this point, she's crying and I'm furious. My wife is a whore? I don't know what to do. I guess the good news, if you can call it that, is that at least I found out the truth. No one would make this shit up. She then tells him that she feels awful the next morning. Nick asks if the three of them, her, him, and Greg, can get back together. She slaps him, and that's the end of their relationship. She learns from others that she is starting to get a bad reputation at the hospital. She quits partying and focuses on her career and the rest of her life. Shortly after that, I met you, she said. You dated his friend, I stated firmly. I know I was so stupid, but I was in love with him, she wailed. So you're still in love with him? Is that what this is about? I asked. No, I love you. I was confused. Suddenly, this guy I was once interested in was now interested in me. I would never do anything about it. It was just flattering. I tell her I need to think about it. We never have dinner and I head out for a walk that ends up dragging on for hours. No wonder it's raining. A month ago, I was happy. Things were going great. I had a beautiful woman as a wife, and I didn't care about anything. Now I question my wife's morals, and I'm not sure I trust her. One thing was certain. I would definitely be leaving Puget Sound for Hawaii, with or without Hillary. Then again, I knew she was a little wild before we got married. But having fun with a guy and his roommate, that was pretty depraved. On the other hand, we weren't married and didn't even know each other at the time. I had some casual sexual encounters before we were married. When I finally made it home, I was confused about a few things. One thing I was sure of. I was moving to Hawaii. The next few days were pretty stressful. I was still trying to figure out what to do about Hillary. I believed she hadn't done anything with this Greg guy, but I believed she was getting too close to him. At one point on Saturday afternoon, I was ready to divorce her and move to Hawaii. A fresh start. On the other hand, I thought back to all the wonderful vacations Hillary and I had spent in Hawaii. The thought of being there without her wasn't as good as being there with her. I'll have to think about what to do. Apparently, we stayed together and moved in together. Hillary swore her love for me and denied any attraction to Greg. I wanted to believe her, and I kind of did. I needed to keep an eye on her. Our life on Aaliyah Drive was wonderful. She worked 3 days a week, and I had my own schedule. There were busy periods in my business, but there were also plenty of times when I could skip out when Heel wasn't working. My workload would go up and down. It really was like a permanent vacation. I ran on Aaliyah Drive almost daily, and when Hillary was free, we hiked together. We explored the island and found beautiful waterfalls, jungle, majestic views, and amazing beaches. One of the features of the Big Island is that it is the newest island in the Hawaiian island chain. Therefore, there are fewer beaches. The good beaches had to be traveled by car to get to, but they were worth it. 2 of our favorite beaches were Quabe and Hapuna Beach. But one particular beach we liked was Makalawina Beach. M Beach. This Thursday, we decided to explore M Beach. At this time, we had not been there yet. Following the directions in the guidebook, we turned onto the road leading to this beach. Across the road was a chain and a sign that read, "Closed for Turnards." From where we stopped, we could see the ocean, and it seemed like it was only a mile or so away. We decided to walk along the lava rock to see it. It was definitely worth it. M Beach is beautiful. Fine white sand and blue-green ocean. It was spectacular. We walked up and down the beach and realized there was no one else on the entire beach. Probably because everyone knew the road was closed on Thursdays. We picked a spot to sit in the sun and enjoy the beach. After a while, I wanted to cool off. I went for a swim, and when I came back, she suggested we have some fun. She just laughs and says, "Since there's no one else, why not?" I can't believe we just made love to my wife on the beach. We stayed at M Beach for a few more hours and then headed back to the car. After we got home, Hillary went to take a shower. What a wonderful day. I felt that I had made the right choice in moving to Hawaii and the right choice in staying with Hillary. The next day, as I leave the training room, I notice Banks on the lawn, slowly and carefully performing a martial arts kata. He's wearing only shorts, no shoes, and no shirt. The guy is in good shape. His skin is a golden brown color. I remembered that he has an elegant look. Not like me, a little more stocky and muscular. As I was leaving, he called out to me, "Brian, how are you doing?" We start talking and end up planning dinner for Friday night. No pauhana this week. We grab a poke at an establishment in town, and on the way back we stop and have a drink at Don the Beachcomber. Banks tells me about his development project near Pahoa on the Hilo side. He has a development plan for the lot he purchased. He also talks about his counseling practice. He says his mission is to help couples build more fulfilling relationships. He says his clients usually don't pay and that he is approached by word of mouth. My goal is to help people explore all that life has to offer. Not to be limited by other people's ideas and rules, he proclaimed. If you and Hillary would like to schedule a session, we can discuss these concepts in more detail. He continued with genuine charm. I'll think about it, said I. I really wasn't sure what he was talking about. As soon as we got home, Hillary told me about her conversation with Chloe. She seems like a smart woman, but she let slip a couple of times about Banks. Hillary also said that Chloe went out of her way to let her know that it was her money that paid for a lot of their lifestyle. Interesting. So far, in my opinion, Banks has been a nice guy, a bit of a charmer, but at this point I don't see anything wrong with him. Wednesday night, Banks stops by our apartment to show us a real estate prospectus. I tell him I'm not interested. He looks disappointed, but quickly returns to his confident demeanor, as if my answer didn't hurt him. On Wednesday night, Hillary was burning with fatigue after 3 consecutive 10-hour shifts. Tonight was no exception. Banks was attentive and funny, and that cheered her up. He inquired about her schedule, and she told him that Thursday was a day she could relax. Most Thursdays, she and I would go to the beach where she could bask in the sun, swim in the ocean, and relax. So far, I have been able to get away on Thursdays. What are your favorite beaches? Asked Banks. Qua Bay and Hapuna are our favorite places, Hillary replied. Then she looked at me and winked. We have visited M Beach several times since our first visit. We ended up inviting Banks to join us in Qua Bay. I wanted her to continue getting to know Banks as much as I did. He turned out to be a good friend, and I imagined that he and Chloe could become our married couple. Hillary looked gorgeous, and a couple of times I caught him looking at her. I couldn't blame him, but a small flame of jealousy flared briefly. At one point I got hot and went for a swim. Both Hillary and Banks refused, no big deal. When I came back from my bath, I saw them laughing and joking about something, but when I went back to the blanket, they stopped talking about what it was. On the way home, Banks asked us if we had been scuba diving. Neither of us had, but we were both interested. Banks told us about a place in Kona where you could take some lessons and get certified. We were interested. Hillary was especially interested. The longer we lived here, the happier I got, and I wanted Hillary to love the lifestyle as much as I did. I was glad we could start a new hobby together. Banks said he had a boat and that he goes to a special place that has an amazing reef and always interesting sea life. We agreed to go on a boat trip with him in a few weeks. When we got back to our apartment after Banks left, we discussed the previous day. You're right, he's a really nice guy. I enjoyed our day today, said Hillary. I was glad she felt that way. If he and Chloe were going to be our friends, I wanted us all to get along. Hey, what were you two laughing so hard about when I went swimming? I asked her. She looked at me, trying to remember what I had asked her, and then quickly looked away as the shadow of a smile flashed across her lips. Oh, nothing. Banks was just trying to make a joke, she said, and I thought she blushed. Funny? What's funny? I asked, perhaps too sternly. Nothing, just don't be so controlling, she said, and that was the end of it. We signed up for scuba diving lessons. The first step was to take the course online, which we did. On Saturday, we met at one of the large hotel pools to use the equipment. The last step was 4 open dives to get certified. Banks told us that he was an instructor, and why don't we practice on the day we plan to go boating with him? It seemed like a good idea. We met at the harbor and headed out to sea. We went past the airport by less than a mile. The water here was blue and calm. We put on our snorkeling gear and Banks told us about the safety precautions the instructor had shown us at the hotel pool. He also told us that the water here wasn't deep and we would go down for a few minutes to make sure everything was okay. We put on short wetsuits and snorkeling gear. What about the sharks? Asked Hillary. There are occasional small reef sharks. I've only seen one once. The big ones, like tiger sharks, are not here, Banks explained. We walked down the stairs and cautiously began to explore the underwater world. It was beautiful. I had no trouble breathing. This is really cool, I thought. I began to sink deeper and felt the pain in my sinuses pressing against my head. I tried to ignore it, but the deeper I went, the more excruciating it became. I had to come up. Even at the surface, it wouldn't go away. I had to get out. I sat on the boat with no gear on, and gradually I started to feel better. My blood pressure seemed to go down. After a few minutes, Banks and Hillary came out of the water and asked what was going on. I explained that I had a headache. Hillary started to go up the ramp to check on me, but I told them to keep diving. I was going to be fine. After a short conversation with me, I told them everything was fine. They continued the dive. After about half an hour, they surfaced. Hillary was so excited and seemed to be having a great time. I really hoped that the cause of my discomfort would not persist. As a thank you, we invited Banks over for dinner. We have developed a very friendly relationship over the past few weeks. When we came to Hawaii, I wanted to make good friends and have a social life. We seemed to be moving in the right direction. Every now and then, the fact that Hillary was comfortable with Banks caused flashes of jealousy, but I knew that was my problem and tried to suppress those impressions. Friday night was once again Pauhana night at the Palms. We found ourselves at a large table with Clarence and Lynn, the Platt family, and the Banks. Is Chloe coming? I asked Banks. No, unfortunately she's in Los Angeles for the next few weeks. Probably on business for a big bank, he replied. I had to admit that he wasn't the least bit upset that his wife was away. We were all talking, socializing, eating, and drinking. At one point, I saw Hillary talking to a young Corey White. I waited a few minutes and joined them. They were talking about scuba diving. She told him about my problems, and he recognized that it was a real problem and that some people suffer from that kind of pressure. At that moment, a gorgeous blonde woman approached us. Corey introduced us. This is my older sister, Kiki. She doesn't work at the Palms full-time, but lives in our family condo when she's in Hawaii, says Corey. She's blonde, slender, and beautiful. A walking Barbie doll. We found out that she is an independent IT professional and also has an apartment in Santa Clara. During our brief conversation, I learned that she is divorced. I love Hawaii and try to come here as often as possible, she says. I start to revisit my first impression of Corey. He seems like a pretty solid guy. Banks shows up at that moment, and the mood immediately changes. Kiki, who was talking and laughing just a moment ago, looks negative and goes silent. Corey has a look on his face like he wants to punch Banks. Banks is as charming as ever, oblivious to the negative sentiment. What's going on here? Kiki excuses herself and Corey leaves without saying a word. It was weird. We start talking about scuba diving and Hillary tells us how much she enjoyed it. Banks talks about different techniques and seems to have a lot of knowledge in this area. Oh, Brian, I hope we can find out what is making you uncomfortable. I wouldn't want to stop, it's so much fun, adds Hillary. Well, since I can't go, you certainly can, I say. He's right, and I'd be happy to be your guide, Banks adds. I hope he's just a good friend. Work for me ebbs and flows, then suddenly becomes fluid. I spend my days in our bedroom analyzing commodity markets and talking to people on the phone. One of the keys to my success is the ability to dig deep. A weather event such as a tornado, drought, or flood can quickly change commodity prices. A few percentage points to one side or the other can make or lose big money. One of my high school friends, Dan Bain, is a climate scientist. To put it bluntly, Dan is very geeky and very smart at the same time. He has all these weather forecasts for months in advance. Dan also still lives at home and doesn't use the phone. You'll have to meet him in person. Like I said, he's weird. There will be an agricultural conference in Seattle in a few weeks. That kind of information might be helpful too. My plan was to attend the 2-day conference and then stop by Dan's relatives in Federal Way and talk to Dan. About a 3-day trip. Maybe Hillary would like to spend a few days in Seattle. I called my sales manager in the Seattle office and told him my plans. Brian, I think this is a great idea. It will go well with our mentoring program that starts next Monday, said my sales manager. I had completely forgotten about that commitment. When I told them I was moving, my company had an ironclad rule about mentoring new employees. I was mentored, and it helped. Remote employees were assigned an apprentice who worked with them for 1 week straight and continued to help them after a week of one-on-one work. I agreed as I had no choice. It would be almost 2 weeks, but we both had friends and relatives to catch up with in Puget Sound. That night when Hillary got home, I told her about the trip to Seattle for 12 days. Brian, I can't do that, exclaimed Hillary. Why not? I asked. That would mean missing 2 weeks of shifts in a row, and I'm still on probation, she said. I don't know if I could take at least one of the weeks off, she continued. Geez. I didn't want to stay with her this long, but it's a sacrifice to live in a tropical paradise. The following week, I made an appointment with an ear, eye, nose, and throat doctor for my scuba diving problem. The Asian doctor asked me about my pain, examined my nose, throat, and ears. He paid special attention to my left ear. Mr. Rivers, you seem to have a problem with the eardrum in your ear. I would highly discourage you from engaging in underwater activities at depths greater than 10 feet. Snorkeling would probably be fine, but scuba diving could permanently rob you of your hearing, he said. Great, now I got Hillary hooked on Aqualung and can't participate. On Wednesday, Banks and I went for a run on Aaliyah Drive. We discussed work and life. It didn't seem like he and Chloe had a particularly close marriage. We talked in front of the building as Hillary was coming home from work. What a day, she said. I can't wait to go to the beach tomorrow. I need to bask in the sun, swim in the ocean, and not think about work, she added. Tomorrow at 9:30, said Banks. Ha, I thought. I was somewhat confused. I was glad he had become such a good friend that he was comfortable inviting himself, but he could wait until we asked him. Sounds good, Hillary said, and that was the end of it. Thursday morning, I was already up and working until 5 a.m. The markets were up and down, which was very unnerving. Most importantly, you had to be a few steps ahead of everyone else to make money. Suddenly, my door swung open. Brian, you're not ready. We're leaving in 10 minutes, proclaimed Hillary. I completely forgot, said I. There was no way I could leave. Hill, honey, I don't think I can go today, at least not right now, I told her. I could see she was starting to get angry. That's when the phone rang. Before answering, I asked, Can you just go with Banks? I asked. She looked at me long and hard, turned and walked away. I answered the phone, and that was the end of it. Good thing we were in this time zone, and by mid-afternoon things were effectively over. I thought about getting dressed and trying to find them. I called Hillary, but she didn't pick up. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I told myself. I must have fallen into a dead sleep because the next moment Hillary kisses me. I realized from the shadows that it was about 6 o'clock. And so we made love. After a few minutes, she silently gets up and walks to the bathroom. The door closes and I hear the shower turn on. After she comes out, I thank her for the pleasant homecoming, and I barely manage to get a smile out of her. I ask her about her beach day and she replies that they went to Quabe. I try to get the details of her day, but she's a little and uncharacteristically silent. If we hadn't just had incredible sex, I'd start to suspect I'd done something obscure. My work continues to be hectic and Friday is another long day. Hillary is in and out of the apartment all day running errands. It's a relaxing weekend, but I still get the impression that something isn't quite right. When I ask Hillary, she replies that everything is fine. It's Monday and the markets are volatile. I'm making money, but I'm making money. I do make a profit in my independent account. My goal is to retire early and enjoy life in Hawaii to the fullest. Hillary works her regular schedule Monday through Wednesday. Thursday mornings I work hard and she shows up around 9. Are you going to the beach? She asks. I look up and she realizes the answer is no. I burrow into my notes and stay close to both computer screens. I have to leave for Seattle next Tuesday for meetings and mentoring, and I have a lot to catch up on by then. I'm stressed out. She kisses me on the cheek with a strange expression on her face, and just as I'm about to ask about the details of her beach day, the phone rings. Soon I'm picking my way through soybean futures. At 6:30 that night, the dinner table was set with a dinner of sushi I'd bought in town. I sort of wanted to make it up to Hillary since I'd been so busy lately. By 7 o'clock she still wasn't home, so I finally called her. Where are you? I asked. I'll be there in 2 minutes, she says. She shows up and thanks me for a wonderful dinner. I ask about how the day went, and it looks like she and Banks were at the beach again. I start doing deep breathing exercises to stay calm. What beach did you go to today? I ask. She hesitates, looks away, and says, Quabe. For some reason, I feel like she's lying to me. I know I'm leaving in a few days, and I want to keep my cool so I don't have to question her. At least for now. After dinner, we are both consumed with our thoughts. Brian, she asks, do you think we're getting the most out of life? It's really weird. Yeah, I say. I mean, don't you think our lives are boring? That there's more to the world than what we're experiencing? Not really, but why? I ask. I have no idea what she's getting at or where these deep philosophical questions come from. Oh, never mind, she says, and before we can continue our discussion, she snores softly. On Friday, all of a sudden, the markets were stable. I'm not sure how long this will last, but if typical patterns hold, the next few weeks should be manageable. I leave the office in the middle of the day on Friday, and Hillary is not at the apartment. I call her, thinking maybe we can do something fun this afternoon, but she doesn't pick up. I decide to make a run down Alaya Drive. After my run, I head for the shower. It looks like Hillary is just finishing her shower. I'm hoping for 2 ships passing in the night. She leaves and I head to the shower. She's not interested. Friday night is Pauhana night. On the way downstairs, I ask Hillary about how the day went, but I don't get any specific answers about what she did all day. We set up in our usual spot near the Platts, Lynn and Clarence there too. Banks was gone. To be honest, I was getting a little tired of him. Besides, it seemed like Hillary was spending more time with him than I was. I'm trying to keep my jealousy in check. I see Corey White, who I've grown to really like. We start talking and he tells me about his research in marine biology. It's pretty interesting. Brian, why don't you come on the boat with me on Monday? I have something to test that day, and I think you'd be interested, said Corey. Maybe, but at what time? I ask. The markets have slowed down and I'm working hard. Hillary works all day seems like a good break. I'll be in port at 11. If you know where Redmond moors his boat, I'm a couple of slipways below. That's the Konkiki, you won't miss it. If you're not there by 11:30, I'll assume something's up. He told me. When I return to our table, I don't see Hillary. I try to act casual, but I can't seem to spot her. I talk to Clarence and Lynn, occasionally glancing over their shoulder in search of Hillary. After a few minutes, Clarence says, I think I saw your fiancée outside the pool. Oh, I say, and quickly cast a glance in that direction before I can control myself. Don't worry, your friend Mr. Redmond was with her, adds Lynn, perhaps with a note of sarcasm. Go, my boy, find her. Clarence dismisses me and I walk away. When I walk up to them, they seem to be having a tense conversation. I'm not sure I like the way Hillary looks at him, as if every word he says has serious meaning. They don't notice me until I'm practically right next to them. When they see me, Hillary looks flustered, like she's been caught doing something wrong. Banks is his charming personality. I'm starting to see that charm in a different context. Brian, Banks exclaims and goes for a hug. I don't return the favor. What is this seclusion away from events? I ask. Hillary still hasn't said anything and looks like she's at a loss. Banks enters the conversation. Sometimes the old gang gets a little stale, he says. I was just describing to heal some of my self-actualization exercises. With her intense profession, there are many ways to stay calm and deal with stress. He reflects. Hillary looks at me hopefully, hoping I'll believe all the nonsense that just came out of his mouth. And Hill. Since when did they know each other so well? Actually, Brian, we've been discussing the possibility of the 3 of us having some counseling sessions to broaden our outlook on life. As I said, I don't charge money for my sessions. This is my gift to humanity, he continues. I look directly at Hillary and say, I'm going back to our friends, have 2 more beers and go home. You can join me if you want. I deliberately ignored Banks and all the nonsense he had just said. A gift to mankind. I walk back to our table and about 30 seconds later, Hillary is next to me. Why were you so mean to Banks? He's your good friend, she asks in a quiet but firm voice. I sat for a while and then told her, I'm starting to sense something from him that I don't really like. What are you talking about? She asks. With all the stress that's been going on in my life lately, and knowing that I'm leaving for Seattle in a few days for almost 2 weeks, I really don't want to get into it with her. I'm making a silent vow to myself to distance myself from him as soon as I get back from my business trip. Hillary and I are also going to have a serious talk when I get back. Never mind, I say. On Monday, I joined Corey on the Konkiki boat. We talked about his work, the ocean, and marine life in the area. It's really very interesting, and he seems to be passionate about it. I'm working on a project with tiger sharks in the Hawaii Island area. I'm working with the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology. We have developed an experimental attractant that I believe will quickly lure sharks to the area where it is injected. If we learn what attracts them, we hope to redesign the process and create an effective repellent. I've actually never tried that combination. Brian, you will be the first witness to this challenge. Corey pulled what looked like an 8-ounce bottle out of a styrofoam cooler. He lowered a protein ball made from fish offal and seaweed into the water, then poured about half the container over it and let it go. He then set the timer on his watch. Corey told me that sharks have an exceptional sense of smell and that tiger sharks can pick up odors up to a mile away. We watched and waited. Nothing happened yet. Just wait, I'm sure of it, he assured me. Suddenly, the surface of the ocean seemed to change and come alive. I saw my first dorsal fin, then another, and another. The protein globules were suddenly attacked and were quickly devoured with brutal intensity. It was exciting and frightening. Corey explained that the tiger shark feeds indiscriminately. It has huge, powerful jaws that can crack the shell of a turtle. Tiger sharks can reach 15 feet in length and are second only to the great white shark in size. They are considered primates of predators. The boat was bumped a couple times, but within 15 minutes the sea was calm again. That was exciting, I said to Corey. He seemed pleased with the results and took some time to type on his tablet. It certainly doesn't make me want to get in the water anytime soon, I said. It was a very unnatural situation, Corey told me. Without the attractant, we never would have been able to lure the sharks here. Corey went downstairs to hide his tablet, and I looked at the vials in the styrofoam cooler. It looked like there were a dozen vials in the styrofoam cooler in a haphazard pile. I thought. A moment later, Corey came up on deck. I quickly turned to him. Brian, there was another reason I asked you to come with me today. Corey said this with a serious expression on his face. You can tell me to mind my own business when I'm done, but there's something I think you need to know. He continued. To say I was confused at this point is an understatement. I just kept my mouth shut and listened to what Corey had to say. He asked if I remembered his older sister Kiki. How could I forget that beautiful girl? She was married to a great guy, Ben Green. Ben handled the finances and they would come to the family home in Hawaii 4 times a year. Ben was able to do some of his work remotely. Apparently, he and Ben became friends with some of the other residents of Kona Palms. One of them was Banks Redmond. Banks has a sly charm and asks questions that soon turn personal. Yeah, I know, I said. One day, Ben had to return to California early, and Kiki kept in touch with Banks. Corey told me that he was an undergraduate student at UCLA at the time. All of this information came from Kiki. While Banks was away, he became increasingly close to Kiki. He talks about his counseling sessions and how he gets people to expand their horizons and live more experiential lives. It sounded familiar to me. Long story short, Kiki had sex with him during a tantric massage session. She soon realized that he was no different than the creepy frat boy trying to get a freshman girl into his room at a party on campus. She was angry at him, and even angrier at herself for falling for his bullshit. Banks tried to continue the relationship, but Kiki told him to just back off. About a week later, Ben returned. Kiki felt so much guilt that she told Ben everything. Ben was furious and went in search of Banks. Banks was smart enough to stay away. Kiki and Ben tried to patch things up, but the combination of her guilt and his anger proved too much and they divorced. She hasn't dated again since. I still talk to Ben sometimes, he's a good guy. I think he's engaged to someone, Corey told me. That damn Banks ruined Kiki's life. I was just sitting there thinking. Banks Redmond is a slick operator. I genuinely thought he was a good friend. Brian, I promised Kiki that I wouldn't say anything about this to anyone, but when I see him interacting with Hillary, I remember what Kiki told me about how he manipulated her. She also made me promise never to get into a physical confrontation with him, even though, God knows, I wanted to kill the bastard. Kiki is ashamed of the whole thing and is very sad that it cost her her marriage. He said, Does Chloe, his wife, know about all this? I asked. I'm sure she knows, or at least suspects. Rumor has it they don't have a prenup. If she divorced him, she'd lose a fortune. She's rich. They remain married, but they live separately. I leave for Australia next week and it will be several months before I return. I don't want to question Hillary's character. I just wanted to give you that information, said Corey. Thank you, I say to him. I have a lot to think about. We dock at the harbor and pick up our gear. As we walk up the gangway, he sets down a styrofoam cooler and opens it. I can see him mentally counting. Suddenly, he looks up at me. I look him in the eye and don't say anything. We look at each other, and then a small smile appears on his face. No words were spoken. As I drove home, I started to feel sick. I was going to kill Banks, I thought. In my mind, I almost hit a local kid when I ran a stop sign. He brushed me off, and I didn't blame him. It reminded me of another incident that happened about 7 or 8 years ago in Seattle. I've always had a temper. I won't go into details, but there have been many ups and downs in my family. There was physical abuse in the family, and because of that, I had anger issues. That energy fueled me on the soccer field. In high school, I played in every conference, and eventually I was invited to play at Pacific Lutheran. It was the only way to go to college. My family had no money for tuition. So in a way, my temper helped me get a college degree. Along the way, it cost me a few girlfriends and other friendships. I knew I needed to address it. At that point, I had not long graduated from college and was still new to the merchandise business, and it was stressful. One Monday night, I was driving through downtown Seattle. If you've never been there, the concentration of homeless people, drunks, and punks there is higher than usual. All worked up and not focused on driving, I almost hit a skateboarder in the intersection. I put my palms up to let him know it was my fault. Well, this tall, skinny, long-haired punk takes his skateboard, swings around, and smashes my headlight. I jump out of the car, and the punk and his skateboarding buddy start throwing shit at me, and I yell about the headlight. As I'm facing the tall guy, out of the corner of my eye, I notice movement. My athletic reflexes kick in, and I dodge another dude trying to blow my head off with his skateboard. He hits me in the shoulder, and it hurts, but I can work. I immediately turn to him and land a straight right punch to the jaw, and he falls to the ground. I'm glad I trained at the Golden Gloves Boys Club. Instinctively, I duck, expecting an attack from the first punk. Once again, I dodge a skateboard aimed at my head. Are these punks practicing to use these things as weapons? He raises it again to try to attack, and I punch him hard in the face. I hear something break. In a blind rage, I keep hitting the son of a bitch. I must have managed 3 or 4 more shots before I'm tackled from behind. It's the cops. I find myself in the back seat of a police car. Outside, an ambulance pulls up, and on the other side of the intersection, there is another police car with its lights on. There are a lot of people around wanting to see what's going on. I pray there is no one there to recognize me. Fortunately, there were witnesses who told the police that I was attacked first, with 2 of them and 1 of me. Someone even has a cell phone video that shows that they were the instigators. They get my information and let me go. They said I would probably be contacted in the next few days. The next day in the afternoon, I got a call from the police. They asked me to come later in the afternoon to make a statement, and I did. Here's what happened. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that I was defending myself. There was plenty of evidence to back that up. It turned out that the first guy I hit had a dislocated jaw and would need extensive dental work to repair his shattered mouth. The second guy has a broken nose and orbital bone. Because of the severity of the beating, I need to see an ADA. We had a long talk, and she said that no charges would be filed against me, but I would have to undergo mandatory counseling with a psychiatrist. Anger management is part of mental health. For the next 8 weeks, I was scheduled for group therapy every Wednesday night at Swedish Hospital. I probably could have resisted, but I knew something had to be done. Truth be told, this counseling really helped me and changed my life in several ways. I learned how to stop myself when I get angry, slow down, think about the situation, analyze it, and make a plan. All the while, I take deep breaths to slow down. Deep breaths, deep breaths. It has really helped. Friends and people at work remarked that I seemed more relaxed. I was in a good mood more often. I didn't get angry as often and laughed more. I also started to attract more women. Perhaps they used to be scared off by my anger. Speaking of women, it was at Swedish Hospital that I met Hillary. I noticed her in the corridors, this incredible-looking woman with a tinge of sadness about her. One evening after a counseling session, I offered to take her out for coffee, and she, to my surprise, agreed. I truly believe. Without the counseling I received, I never would have asked her. My goal was to get her into bed, and we eventually did, but along the way I started to like her. It was a little unclear to me if she liked me too, but she kept saying yes when I kept asking her out. She would tell me that I was different from others she had dated. At the time, I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Eventually, we ended up in my bed, and she certainly knew what to do and was eager to tell me what she liked. As we lay there, she asked, "So this is our last date?" and looked at me. I was actually thinking about an exit strategy. I liked her, and I had just found out she was great in bed, but I really wasn't looking for commitment. I must have procrastinated too long because she cried quietly. Wait, I said. No one is talking about a last date, at least I'm not. Now tell me, why all the tears? I asked. We talk, and she tells me how wonderful I am, and that I'm so different from regular guys, and that all doctors are narcissistic assholes. I don't ask her too often about all those asshole doctors, but I'm sure there are a few stories. I think of Hillary. She looks great. She's fun to be with. She's got brains, she's not stupid. No real weaknesses. We continue to date, and as you may have realized, stay together. At least for now. Back to Hawaii in the present moment. At the intersection on Aaliyah, I stopped to gather my thoughts. I don't know if anything happened, but now I know Banks' MO. My goal is to get Hillary and myself out of his net. After that, I'll need to devise a serious plan for Hillary. As Clarence once told me, a good relationship is built on trust. Currently, our foundation wasn't as strong as I would have liked it to be. I'm considering canceling the trip, but I'm setting myself up for a big move in the next few weeks. The market is ripe for profit-taking. With the little bit of knowledge I will gain from the conference and more importantly from Dan, my brilliant climatologist friend, I am confident I can make the right moves. I'm calm, I'm in surveillance mode, and I'm going to find out what the hell is going on with Hillary and Banks. She comes home Monday night and is in a bad mood. I'm trying to figure out how to approach her, but the time is not right yet. I know that if I push her at the wrong time, it could backfire and make it much harder to get any information. Tuesday night is a little different. She is more relaxed and friendly after work, and we enjoy a nice dinner. I tell her that Clarence and Lynn are taking me to the airport on Wednesday, and could she pick me up a week later, on Friday? She agrees. Hillary, I ask, are you sure you can't come with me? It would be like a vacation. I know there's little chance, but I have to try. She doesn't even consider the possibility and quickly dismisses it, citing work. Then I start broaching the uncomfortable subject of Banks. I tell her that I think we need to put some distance between us and him. I tell her, without elaborating, that I've heard some negative things about him. I ask her to stay away from him while I'm gone. She flares up. How dare I say such things about our friend? Banks listened to her and started counseling, and she's feeling much better, she adds. And now I want her to stay away from him until I'm gone for 2 weeks and she has no other friends? She's angry, and now I'm angry too. I don't trust him, and neither should you, I state. Here we go, jealousy again, she says. And so it goes on from there. She ends up sleeping in the guest room even after I try to apologize. This night really went downhill. I got a kiss and a brief hug before leaving for the airport, but it wasn't as warm. I feel like our marriage is on the rocks, and she has no idea how serious our situation is. I remembered a bumper sticker I once saw. The first line read, "If you love something, set it free." And the second line read, "If it doesn't come back, hunt it down and kill it." It seemed to me to be appropriate for the current situation. Because of the time change, it's already evening when I land. I rent a car and head to the Marriott. It's 9:30 Pacific time, which means 6:30 p.m. in Hawaii. I don't call her that night. I'm tired. The next day there is an agro conference and I gather some good information. Afterward, I chat with a few people and learn a lot of useful things. I enter my notes on my iPad and someone says there is a cocktail party in the next room. I check my watch. It's a little after 6 p.m. Pacific time, which means it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Hawaii. I'm trying to call Hillary. She's not picking up. I have a few cocktails and enough appetizers that I don't have to eat dinner. Around 8:30 p.m. I try calling again, but there is no answer. The conference will conclude on Friday mid-afternoon. I feel that the information I received was useful. While I'm entering new notes, Hillary calls. Hi, how's the conference going? She asked. And we discussed my trip so far. I tried to call you yesterday. What have you been up to? I ask. I want to find out what she's been up to, but I'm walking on eggs. Fighting over Banks isn't going to lead to anything good. She says she's doing the usual things, running errands, grocery shopping, and so on. I ask if she went to the beach yesterday, and she says yes, but not for long. I ask which beach. She hesitates and says Quabe. I really want to ask if Banks was with her, but I hesitate. I ask what her plans are for the weekend. She tells me that there is no pauhana tonight and that she plans to have a quiet weekend. I tell her I love her as we hang up. This phone conversation went well. My strategy is to be sweet and loving to her. If Banks tries to seduce her, I will hope that her love for me will overcome his advances. On Saturday, I'm heading to the Bain House in Federal Way. They were our neighbors in Tacoma when I was growing up. Mr. and Mrs. Bain are nice people and I'm always happy to see them. Like I said, Dan is weird. He literally lives in his parents' basement, but it's not as weird as you might think. One of Dan's habits is that he is an absolute neatnik. Everything in his basement is clean and organized. He has file cabinets and bookshelves where everything is cataloged and organized. He sits at his desk, which is in the very center of the basement. There are 2 huge monitors on the desk. In the corner is a small cot that he sleeps on. Dan is dressed in slacks and a short sleeve button-up shirt. He rarely leaves the house. You can see that he's happy to see me. I don't think he'll have many guests. We spend time talking about the past, our old neighborhood, and the people we grew up with. Honestly, for me, it's an enjoyable pastime to spend time with Dan. I don't know how he makes money or who exactly pays him. What I do know is that he makes money. He builds complex computer weather models using all sorts of data, both current and historical. He's tried to explain this to me before, but I was quickly lost. Like I said, Dan is brilliant. I've asked him before if he ever provides information to people in my business. He said no. If Dan can be relied upon, he is completely honest. I have a list of things I want to ask him about. I have to make sure he stays on task, or we'll branch off into topics that could take hours to cover. I ask him these specific questions and also ask him to chart the weather for the next 90 days or so and enter various factors into the equation. His mom brings us lunch and we continue talking for a few more hours. Then I leave. I tell him I'll call and he says please don't. Dan doesn't like the phone. He sends the weather maps I asked him for within 24 hours. In the evening I try to call Hillary, but I get voicemail again. Sunday I go for a run. I return to the hotel and start working on a trading strategy based on the information I've gathered. I have a really good feeling about this. I've never done such a deep dive before. Hillary and I are finally communicating. She seems eager to talk to me. I think that's a good sign. She's asking me about the conference and her visit with Dan Bain. Her voice is very chipper. I tell her she sounds happy. Oh, Brian, I just love this place. Hawaii has everything I wanted and more. I love the weather, I love our condo, and even the job turned out better than I thought it would. I'm just thrilled with our decision to move, she exclaims. It makes me happy. It was really my decision to move, and Hillary disagreed a bit. I'm glad she likes Hawaii as much as I do. I ask her what has caused such a sudden revitalization. I connect with Banks, and he helps me better understand myself and what life experiences are. She continues. I'm not talking. I start to get angry. I take so many deep breaths I might pass out. I wonder what kind of crap this asshole is feeding her. After hearing Corey's story, I guess. Oh, really? I say calmly. Tell me about how he's helping you, I ask, trying to remain as calm as possible. I sit and listen as she talks about how she feels, what life has to offer, expanding her horizons and finding true happiness in all areas of her life. How Banks helps her realize things that explain some of her negative feelings. I'm starting to feel nauseous. I'm afraid I'm going to explode. I use one of my anger management techniques and calmly but firmly walk away from the conversation. I tell her I'll call her this week. I pondered the situation. Corey's story about Kiki kept playing in my head. I had a few options. 1. I could have booked a ticket home and intervened. That was ruled out. I wouldn't do that. 2. Believe she loves me too much to give in to him. I'd say it's 50-50ths at this point. 3. Accept the fact that they have had or will have sex and divorce her. This was painful to think about. I started to develop a plan. My mentoring week went well. My intern was a young man named Michael Rodriguez. Mike was a hard worker and eager to learn. Each day I spent several hours studying my own trading. The markets were calm, and Dan's weather forecasts were hitting the mark so far. I had a trading plan for the next few weeks that was going to make me a lot of money. Monday, I don't call Hillary and she doesn't call me. I know she's working. Tuesday morning, she calls around 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'm at work and we only talk for a few minutes. The exuberant excitement from our previous phone conversation continues. The week is flying by quickly and it's the end of the workday on Thursday. My plane leaves SeaTac tomorrow morning. I take my intern Michael Rodriguez out for a beer to celebrate his internship. It's a pleasant evening, and we talk mostly about the trade. On the way home, I'm relatively calm about what I might learn about the situation with Hillary and Banks. If he and all his crap seduced her, it's over. What I do next has yet to be formulated. If the seduction doesn't happen, my strategy will be to slowly and decisively cut Banks out of our lives. The flight arrives in Kona around 4 p.m. One of the small things I like about Kona is the quaint airport. Everything is outside, few interior buildings. Hillary picks me up at the curb. Hillary's in a good mood. A little weird, but good. She talks a lot, laughs a lot, and smiles a lot. She asks me questions about the trip, and when I start telling her about the Bains or my mentor or whatever, it's like she's not interested. She asks me another question before I even finish answering the previous one. It's weird. It's Friday and there is a Pauhana event at the pool. I'm tired, but I ask her if she wants to go anyway. She says she doesn't care. I don't mind if we don't go, she says. That's weird too. Hillary loves any kind of party, and we haven't missed one since we've lived here. I think maybe there is some reason why she doesn't want to attend these events. I think that would be fun, I say. I've been on the mainland too long, and I feel like having a couple glasses of Mai Tai, I add. Hillary was silent for a moment. I wouldn't mind being alone with you, she says and strokes my thigh. Okay, I say. We'll leave for an hour or so and then we'll get reacquainted, I proclaim. Hillary says nothing, but the issue is settled. We get down a little after 6 to the usual group. Everyone is in place, but so far I don't see Banks. It's a very typical night at Pauhana. We see Clarence and Lynn, the Platts and Nishimura, the couple who moved here a few months ago. I know Corey is in Australia, but I see Kiki across the street and get up to talk to her. I know I can't say anything about her relationship with Banks. I promised Corey that I wouldn't. We start talking and she is very nice. She tells me that she is staying at their family home indefinitely while Corey is in Australia. She explains that sometimes it's better to hang out at the condo while Corey is gone. There's plenty of room, but sometimes I start to feel like a foster mom to my little brother and all his dates, she says with a laugh. After a while, I glance across the street and Hillary is looking at me, frowning slightly. Maybe it's her turn to get a little jealous. Kiki and I continue talking for another half hour or so. Every once in a while, I could feel the sadness slipping into her as we moved on to some topic. I tell her how much I enjoyed talking to her, but it's time for me to head home. As I leave, I get a brief but pleasant hug from her. Back at our table, I don't see Hillary. The ever-observant Clarence notices that I'm looking for her. I think Mrs. Rivers left 15 minutes ago, he tells me. Oh, she must be back at the condo, I say, heading towards the house. Brian, he says, I believe she was headed for Mr. Redmond's house. And, dear boy, it's none of my business, but while you were on the mainland, they spent a lot of time together. Clarence tells me this with an expression of some concern. Nodding slowly as I absorbed this information, I turned to Clarence and gave him a brief hug, thanking him. He seemed a little surprised by the hug. I go to our condo #508. My next Mai Tai has more rum than juice, and the ones after that are mostly rum. It's not even 9 p.m. yet, and alcohol and jet lag are making me pass out. When I wake up, it's 2:30 in the morning. So it's 5:30 Pacific time, which is about the time I usually get up. I don't want to wake Hillary, so I head to the spare bedroom. I take a short nap, but by 6 in the morning, I'm up and out for a run on Aaliyah Drive. I have a lot to think about. Hillary's behavior, Banks, the commodities market, Clarence's comments, and I also think about Kiki White. One thing is for sure, Hillary and I are going to have a very frank conversation about Banks in the future. Today, back at the condominium, Hillary is drinking her morning coffee. She smiles and asks how my run went. I reply that it was fine, and then ask her about last night. What happened last night? I ask. I went back to the table and you were gone. Where did you go? I'm pretty sure she went to Banks's apartment. I just didn't feel like it last night. I just needed a break, she tells me. Well, you weren't here, I say. Where did you go? I ask. You know how it is sometimes. You just don't feel like being at a party. You looked like you were having a good time. I didn't want to ruin your fun, she told me with a brief smile. Hillary, for the third time, I say a little more forcefully but still calmly. Where did you go? She pauses, looks at me, and then lowers her eyes. After about a minute, she says, I went to talk to Banks. I try to stay calm, but I'm starting to get angry. I say to her, so your husband's been gone for almost 2 weeks, and you end up spending time with Banks? When I got home, you weren't yourself, she tells me. I'm furious. She's avoiding my questions, and her relationship with Banks is too close. It's broken our marriage. I need to know the truth about what's going on. When I question her about her relationship with Banks, she finally says the following. He's counseling me. He really understands me. He shows me how to experience more and live a fuller life. When I'm with him, I'm calm. My stress evaporates and I can physically relax. What the hell was that asshole feeding her? I lose my temper, start yelling, and tell her I'm going to talk to him and settle this once and for all. We had a big fight and she left. I've decided not to go to Banks' apartment right now. I'm practicing calming exercises. Deep breaths. Deep exhale. I can't afford an assault and battery charge at this time. I'm hanging out at the condo and Hillary's not coming back. I wouldn't be surprised if she was at Banks. Earlier in the day, I text her telling her we need to have a serious talk. A few hours later, she replies that she'll be home at 6 p.m. and is ready to talk. All afternoon, I spend the entire afternoon planning my strategy. It basically boils down to what I was thinking while I was on the mainland. If she had sex with him, we're screwed. If she didn't, we cut him out of our lives. I have another plan for Banks. At 6 o'clock, the doorbell rings. Why is she ringing the doorbell? When I open it, I see Hillary and her escort, Banks. He looks at me with a calm and smug expression on his face. I flare up, quickly going into calming exercises for several reasons, including not hitting him. What the hell is he doing here? I ask. Hillary looks at me with an expression of patience. Banks and I have a lot to tell you, and it would be best if we discussed it all together. Banks and me. I want to throw him out, but curiosity about what they're going to say overrides my initial impulse. I need to get to the bottom of this. I really need to know what's going on. Okay, I say. Why don't you start telling me what's going on? We move into the living room. They sit on the couch facing me. I sit in the only chair. Brian, you know I've had self-esteem issues my whole life, she says. She looks at me, waiting for a response. I just stare back at her dumbly. Well, she continues, I'm beginning to understand the origins of some of these problems. Banks is opening up this information for me. I feel so strong and happy. For the first time in my life, I feel really happy. Are you telling me you're not happy in our marriage? I ask her. No, Brian, honey, I love you. You're wonderful. It's not about you, it's about me, about understanding myself, pushing my boundaries, and ultimately being the best life partner for you. Banks is teaching me so much, she says. I'm getting close, Brian. I'm almost to the point where I can live life to the fullest, she pleads. Outwardly, I'm calm, but inside I'm more than angry. Her stupidity and his bullshit really got to me. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Make a plan. I sit back and calm down and don't say anything. I guess they think I don't understand. Brian, Banks cut in with a professorial look. There's a little child living inside each of us, seeking parental approval. Hillary has abandonment issues stemming from her father's abandonment. She used her appearance to try to get that validation. What are we in our first year of psychology school? I wonder if this asshole believes the crap that comes out of his mouth. He continues to talk about expanding horizons, breaking down personal barriers, and learning about all aspects of life. I'm starting to get tired of it all and actually pass out, but I do notice one thing. Hillary is looking at him in a different way than I saw her looking at Dr. Greg Gorchich all those months ago. It seemed that all his chatter had come to an end, and then he said something to me that shocked me. Hillary will stay with me for the next week, and we can get through the final hurdles and get her ready for a full life. What? I yell. You're moving out? I ask. It's hard to stay calm with news like this. Brian, honey. She is literally on her knees, clasping her hands together as if in prayer. It's only for a week or so, she pleads. At that, a hopeful smile appears on her face, as if she wants me to realize the importance of all of this. Are you sleeping with this guy? I ask. At this point, I need to sort this shit out and figure out what's really going on. Oh, Brian, sex is so not important in the scheme of life, she says. Banks nods prudently, as if his student has learned his lesson, and the professor confirms it. Brian. Banks speculates the human race has many ways to communicate. Sight, sound, hearing, and of course touch. Old morals can limit people in what they can experience in order to live the most fulfilling life possible. So in general terms, he just told me they were having fun. I remember that first time at the beach, when he looked at her in her bikini. Hillary, I say. I make one last attempt. Don't do this. You're my wife. We have some problems, but we can get through this. Don't leave me. Honey, she pleads. It's just a week. One little week out of our lives. I'm going to come back and be the best version of myself for you for the rest of our lives. She says this while looking at me with the same blissful smile on her face. With those words, Banks stands up and Hillary follows suit. As they walk out the door, she shouts, I love you to me. I hardly slept that night. I know my marriage is over, and I'm not as sad as I might have thought. Most of all, I'm angry. In particular, angry at Banks. I'm starting to think about my plan. I did a little research, and I think I've determined what type of predator Banks is. He considers himself a top-tier predator. It's not enough for him to entertain a woman. It's not enough for him to entertain another man's woman. It's also not enough for him to entertain another man's woman for a man to know about it. He needs to entertain another man's woman and have the man accept it. That's not going to happen here. Sunday morning, I head out for a run on Aaliyah Drive. It's a crowded street this morning. Along the way, I am immersed in reflection, working on my acting skills. For my plan to work, I have to be believable. On my way back, I see Kiki outside the building. I waved at her and we got to talking. She said she was heading out for coffee. I ask if I can join her. Will Hillary be joining us too? She asks. I hesitate and then tell her we are not together. She says she saw us 2 nights ago at Pau Hana together. I tell her it's a long story if she's interested. I feel like with all the gossip about Kona Palms, she already has an idea. Sure, I'm interested. Let's get some coffee, replies Kiki. We're going to Java on the rocks. We're outside and I'm dressed nicely in my running clothes. I tell Kiki a very brief version of my situation with Hillary. And with Banks. She's quiet, just taking it all in, but I can tell it's very personal to her. We both got hurt because of Banks Redmond. As we walk back, we talk about other topics, and we have a really good conversation. I'm starting to like Kiki. We get back and I ask her if we could get together next weekend. She starts to shake her head in refusal and I stop her. Kiki, I'm not Banks, I say. I like you as a friend. At the moment, I'm married. But I expect my marital status to change very quickly. You know why. Come on, 2 friends for now, dating. She smiles and it's like sunshine. Good, I guess. I'd like to see you again. But for now, we're just friends. She gives me a brief hug and kisses my cheek. As she walks away, I notice her step bounces. It's Monday and the markets are calm, but I feel change will come quickly. I have been studying Dan's models, and they match the information from the agriculture conference. I am making big moves in corn and coffee. I am getting into soybean futures. I make all these moves before the market has time to react. I have my own LLC that is drowned in several offshore corporations. It's legal. I just like to keep things separate. It may eventually lead to me, but it will take a lot of resources. This is my secret account. Through the LLC, I make my own trades. If I do it right, I have at least $500,000 in my secret account. In fact, it could be as much as $1 million. I haven't seen either Hillary or Banks at Kona Palms since Saturday night. That's fine, but I need to contact Banks as part of my plan. I got to the office early on Wednesday and so far so good. I'm seeing a trend and it looks like others are seeing it too. The big difference is that I managed to get in while prices were low. At 9:30 in the morning, I take a walk around the grounds of the Palms Hotel. On the lawn, I see Banks practicing martial arts. I quickly visualize myself as a beaten, insecure man. I stop him and apologize. I startled him, and I think he thought I was going to attack him at first. I thanked him for helping Hillary and asked if we could talk to him sometime. Nodding, he agreed that it was a good idea. Suddenly, as if it had just occurred to me, I told him that I needed one more dive to get certified as a scuba diver. We could go, he would instruct me and help me help Hillary. I asked him not to say anything to Hillary about us being together. I don't want to distract her from the work you and she are doing together. I tell him with a frank and serious expression on my face and furrowed brows. We agreed to meet at the harbor on Thursday at 3 p.m. I hug him as we leave. Thank God this guy has such a big ego. He wants to complete his domination of me by getting me to agree to let him entertain my wife. Works right into my plan. I have an appointment with a divorce attorney this afternoon. I discussed the situation with my new attorney, Gerald Chin. He asked me what level of aggression I wanted to approach this case with. Humiliation with time off from her job, restraining orders, accusations of adultery, what would I want to do? I tell him I need to think this through. I ask him to start the paperwork. I get up early Thursday morning. There's a lot to do. First up is a long bike ride north on Ali to the Queen K Highway. I get back before 10 a.m. I look at the markets and everyone seems to be following my forecast. I'm supposed to meet Banks at the harbor at 15 o'clock. After running around a bit, I get there shortly after 14 o'clock. I carefully reload my gear onto his boat. I'm wearing a cheap, flowery Hawaiian shirt and a big planter hat. I never wear clothes like that. He shows up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I act submissive and obey him, trying to hurt his ego. We talk nonstop as we settle in. Brian, he began. I thought you had an inner ear problem that kept you from diving, he asks. I got another report and was told that I was probably going too deep too quickly. It will take me longer to get down to reef level, but I was assured that if I go down slowly, I'll be fine. That's a load of crap, but he bought it. Tell me, I ask, how is Hillary doing? I'm so glad his ego is so inflated. I don't feel any suspicion about what I did. He says she is developing. He has put her in a program that helps her find herself. She is blossoming and her beauty is also blossoming. He says she is overcoming self-doubt and expanding her horizons in all aspects of her life. In fact, he says, when she is back in your bed, you will be very pleased with all she has learned. I am happy to be her instructor, and you will be the recipient of her acquired skills. Hillary is a very sensual woman. It took all my self-control not to hit him at that moment, but I remained calmly submissive. I nod my head, as if everything he'd said suddenly made sense. Thank you. I tell him with a look of awe on my face. He's buying it. The average man, he nodded in my direction, has no idea what to do with a beautiful woman like Hillary. You have to understand them first and peel back all the layers until you know exactly what they want. I've helped many women better understand their own sexuality. Like I said, that's my gift to those I counsel. If the sea had been a little more rough, I might have written off my nausea as seasickness. But no, the sea is calm today. In life, you will meet people who are not like members of the animal kingdom, he continues. In nature, there are predators. The same is true of humans. Brian, I will tell you without false modesty that I am at the top of the food chain. I see what I want and I take it. I'm a predator. I do my best to act like every word he says has divine meaning. It's really disgusting. Ah ha ha, he proclaims. We're here. I'm going to drop anchor and pass out. My scuba gear is in these bags. Get them out and we'll get started, he commands, lowering himself underwater. It couldn't be better. I grab his short wetsuit and get him ready to dive. By the time he comes up, everything is ready. I'm still rummaging around with my gear in my big carry-on bag. Looks like you're packed for a week, he says. I just laugh. As he puts on his shorts, he notices a peculiar odor. He sniffs the air, and a puzzled expression appears on his face. I stand a little farther away, but I watch him closely. He shakes his head, as if this is just one of life's little mysteries, and walks down the stainless steel stairs into the sea. Before diving underwater, I tell Banks, it will be about 15 minutes before I get down to the reef. I need to descend slowly, I explain. He waves his hand as if my situation is of no consequence to him. That's right. When Corey used the attractant, he only used half the bottle. I wonder what the reaction would be with a full bottle. The last step, I raised the dive ladder to the deck. There was now 3 feet of smooth fiberglass between the ocean and the deck railing. It's hard to get over that. I put my shorty on in case he shows up. Now I'm just waiting for the show to start. Nothing happens at first. Did I do something wrong? I wait and watch. After a few minutes, I notice the surface of the ocean had changed. I notice the dorsal fins. There they are. An instant later, Banks surfaced 20 yards or so away. Shark! He yells and swims frantically toward the boat. I watched it with horrified admiration, feeling no remorse. Strangely enough, he made it to the boat, but found the ladder missing. Brian! He shouted. Get the ladder down. There are sharks in the water. But I thought you were a predator? Said I with mocking sincerity. Brian, for God's sake, please help me. And he went underwater. The sea surged with the underwater attack. Clouds of dark red blood floated up from below. That was all I saw of Banks. Some more floundering, and soon the sea calmed. I waited an hour to launch my little inflatable boat. I was nervous even doing this considering how many sharks I had seen. I headed towards the beach. Looking at the beautiful sunset, I dozed off for a moment. I shook myself awake and ordered myself to move on. The hardest part was done, but there was more to be done. So far, the plan was working perfectly. Behind the switch, I disconnected the small electric motor and threw it overboard. It sank like a rock. Then I put on my backpack, took out my knife, and cut the inflatable raft. Because of the tides, you never know where the pieces of this raft will be thrown. I swam to the shore. The sky was turning dark blue. I came across a field of AA, or lava. I hid my gear in the back of the AA field, away from places where it might be found. M Beach is closed on Thursday, so I was doubly protected from potential thieves. I found my stash and changed into my running gear. Putting on my backpack, I walked carefully over the uneven terrain toward the lights of the highway. It was an 11-mile run in the dark to the Kona Palms Hotel. The first half of the way, I was fueled by the adrenaline of the day. The last half gave me a hard time. It had been a long day and I was out of gas. By the time I reached home, it was almost 9 o'clock. That evening, I just sat in my apartment and thought. Mentally, I analyzed the previous day. I didn't think I'd be spotted on Banks' yacht. I was wearing a funny shirt and a hat. I kept my head down out of the boat as we left the harbor. I wiped down every single thing in the boat that I remembered touching. I finally decided that no one had seen me run out onto the highway. It was dark. The events of that day flashed through my mind. Despite the terrible attack and Banks' death, I felt no remorse. I know I can never tell anyone about that day. Friday dawned a new day, and at 5 in the morning I was back at work. Another normal day. The markets were behaving as the more aggressive models predicted. I was slowly selling my positions. I was getting out of the game. I calculated that my trading commissions alone brought me about $40,000. For my LLC, my gross income before taxes was over $700,000. By mid-afternoon, I was a little surprised that I hadn't heard anything about Banks or Hillary. By the evening news, there was a report of a missing person and an abandoned boat anchored off the coast near the airport. Friday night, Hillary knocks on the apartment door. All day long, I had been thinking how to play it. I knew this moment would come. "Hillary," I say in surprise. "What do you want?" My role is the jilted husband. It's actually not that hard to play her. She hugs me with tears in her eyes. "Brian Banks is missing. They found his boat at sea, but he wasn't on board," she cries. I don't respond to the embrace. My arms lie limply by my side. I pull away from her and ask what's wrong. "Brian is all over the news," she says. "They found his boat, but there's no sign of Banks." Now she's sobbing. I look at her as if trying to comprehend the situation. I paused, then said, "I'm sure he'll show up, probably nothing to worry about." She looks at me with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, thinking that maybe I was right. I walk over to her and she seems to think I'm going to put my arm around her, put my hand on her back, and gently lead her to the door. "I thought you said you were moving for a week. You have a few more days." I say this without any emotion. She looks at me with a misunderstanding look. "Brian, you're kicking me out of my own home. I need you now more than ever," she stutters. "Looks like you didn't need me while you were having fun with Banks at his apartment," I say. "No more games now, I'm furious. Brian, sex is so not important. Banks says it's just a different way of communicating. Our traditional morals are preventing us from finding ourselves. Please don't let a little thing like sex get in the way of our growth together." "Get out!" I yell. If I hear that self-actualization crap one more time, I'm going to throw up. As she walks away, she sobs. Sunday morning, Kiki and I have coffee again. I make sure we only look like friends. No hugging, no kissing, no holding hands, nothing. We get along great. We talk about Banks a little, but not much. First of all, I don't want to seem too interested in him. That might seem suspicious. Second, I really don't care. Don't get me wrong, I would love to hug and kiss Kiki. I have a feeling she would enjoy it too. I'd love to just hold her hand. For a number of reasons, I don't have to rush into it. Back at the condo, I turn on the news. The first thing I hear is a gruesome discovery on a popular beach outside of Kona. A severed arm, possibly from a shark attack, washed ashore. Here we go. On Monday, Hillary tries to call me, but I don't pick up. Then I get another call. It's the police. They say they're investigating the death of Banks Redmond. They stop by my apartment and we discuss the Thursday that Banks left the harbor. The detective mentions that they think I might have gone snorkeling with Banks. I denied it. I told them about my inner ear problems and gave them the name of my doctor to check if they wanted to. That was the last I heard from them. I changed the locks on the condo, but Hillary keeps trying to get back to me. I hear sobbing voicemails and banging on the condo door day and night. On Friday, I call Gerald Chin and tell him I want her taken to court. I also want a restraining order citing that she is abandoned and adulterous. He asks when, and I tell him Friday night at the Kona Palms on Aaliyah Drive at 7 p.m. Pau Hana will be there that night. It's a low-key event, fresh after the news of Banks' gruesome death. He was not loved. I recognize it in the Palms community, but he was one of us. The investigation lasted several days, but due to the lack of any other information, it was announced to be a shark attack. Both Kiki and Hillary are attending the event. I sit safely at a small table with the Platts, Clarence, and Lynn. A few times Hillary approaches me, but my friends look away from me. Kiki and I smile and meet glances a few times, but she knows to stay away for now. Amidst the blooming shirts, shorts, bikinis, and two bikinis, a short, dapper Asian man in a suit and tie enters the gathering. The group falls silent for a moment and then resumes their usual conversation. He walks up to Hillary and calls her name. I see her nod, and he holds out a 9x11 envelope to her. "You have been served." With a slight polite bow, he turns and walks away. There is silence in the Pau Hana, and then Hillary shakes with sobs. Even I get a little uncomfortable. I get up and walk away into the dark depths of the grounds before she notices me. In the distance, I hear her sobbing as she calls my name. I'm already thinking about getting a room at the Royal Kona Hotel for the night, just to avoid her, when suddenly a small hand grabs my arm. It's Kiki. "Hi," she says. "Want some company?" I tell her yes, but I'm not in the mood to talk. We're going to her house. We talked for a while, and I asked if I could stay to avoid a confrontation tonight. She agreed. "Just don't take it the wrong way," she said. I knew. I successfully avoided Hillary all weekend and returned to the 508 on Saturday night. On Sunday, Kiki and I had coffee and had a long, frank, and wonderful conversation. We still hadn't talked about the future, but I think we both knew we had a future together. Finally, I talked to Hillary. She begged and pleaded and cried. I told her it was over. When she finally realized it, she was furious. She got herself a lawyer and the battle began. Chin had a staff of investigators and interviewed many people who witnessed Banks molesting Hillary. One resident saw them naked together on Banks' deck. On Friday morning, I had a visit from Clarence. He informed me that Chloe, Banks's widow, would be arriving on Saturday from the mainland, apparently to clean up some of Banks' affairs. I thought about this news and said, "But Hillary will stay there." "Yes, dear boy, I know that. She doesn't know about Miss Davenport's arrival." "I thought you should know so you can prepare accordingly." All week I received calls from Hillary, alternating between anger over the divorce and pleas to leave things alone and stay together. My love for her was gone. I just wanted to leave. On Saturday morning, I met with Kiki to help me develop a plan to end the relationship. At first, she didn't want to agree on a couple of details, but then she agreed. I wasn't around when Chloe arrived at her and Banks' apartment, now occupied by my soon-to-be ex-wife Hillary, but from several accounts, that's what happened. Chloe arrives at the apartment and quickly realizes that someone was there. Obviously not Banks. At that moment, Hillary was just taking a bubble bath. Chloe walks in and knocks the spirit out of her. Chloe demanded to know what the hell Hillary was doing in her apartment. She didn't know or care about Banks, his latest girlfriends, or who he was having fun with. "Why are you here?" yelled Chloe at Hillary. Hillary stood up and covered herself with a towel, soap bubbles sliding down her body. "Oh, Chloe," exclaims Hillary, "isn't it awful to be Banks?" With sadness and pleading in her eyes, she asks. "No," said Chloe. "It's not horrible at all. In fact, all those sharks saved me millions. I was just about to divorce that asshole." Hillary looks at Chloe with a blank stare. How could she say that about her brilliant mentor? "Now get out of my house before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing," says Chloe to her. Chloe stops her as she, dejected, heads to the bedroom to get dressed. "Out," she shouts. But my clothes," Hillary wailed. "Out," she commanded, "and give me back my towel." Now Hillary is naked in the street. Kind Lynn and Clarence rescue her and give her clothes before she gets even more naked. Apparently, one of the residents peeked. An hour later, she shows up at my door. "Brian," she says, "I know lawyers fight, but you're my husband. Can't we at least talk?" she asks. I let her into the house. She sits on the couch and I sit in the only chair. "I miss you, and I still don't understand why you're so angry with me," she says. "Hillary, you slept with Banks. You gave him your body, and worst of all, you acted like it didn't matter," I tell her. "Brian, why are you so hung up on the sexual component of my healing and self-realization?" "I was doing this for us," she tells me. "Are you saying that sex with Banks was somehow supposed to be good for our relationship?" "Brian, forget about having sex with Banks. You and I are meant to be together. I'm committed to you. Banks helped me realize that you are truly my life partner. From now on, every moment of every day, it's my job to make you happy. What more could I want?" She speaks with sincere conviction, looking me straight in the eye. Just then, Kiki comes out of the bedroom. Hillary looks at him with a shocked expression on her face. "Oops," Kiki says, making no move to cover herself. A small smile plays on her face. "You!" shouted Hillary. "What are you doing here?" "Well, you know how outdated morals can limit people," Kiki says with an honest face. "Anyway, sorry to interrupt," she says as she walks back into the bedroom. "Brian, once she's gone, could you come back and expand my horizons again?" She looks at Hillary intently, arching her eyebrows. "I'm sorry, Hillary," I say. "I need to go back and work on becoming the best version of myself." Hillary runs out of the apartment sobbing. Everyone needs to realize one thing. By far the closest thing I've had with Kiki is a couple of light kisses. She reluctantly agreed to help. She only had to leave the bedroom in her robe. She improvised the rest. I'm not complaining. When I walk into the bedroom, she is already dressed. She sees the disappointment on my face and laughs. "You look like someone took away your favorite toys," she says with a beautiful smile. A few months later, Hillary and I were legally divorced. She had long since moved to the mainland. In the divorce agreement, we split the bank accounts. I never disclose my secret account. I'm buying out her share of the condominium. I'm not leaving. Kiki practically lives with me. I never talk about banks, shark bait, or even scuba diving. Not even with Corey. He and I have become good friends. Every once in a while I catch him looking at me. I get the feeling he's guessing what happened. Life in paradise is beautiful. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.